Hi guys, James at Rampant Lion Reviews again for you today with another beer review. For this one, we are going to head over to the US once again for the first time in what feels like a very long time here on Rampant Lion Reviews. Now, the beer we're looking at today is a collaboration between two very well known and very well respected craft breweries. Both of them have featured on the channel a few times before, albeit nowhere near as frequently as I would have liked. And the main reason for that is just that we don't see too many beers from either of these guys over here in Europe these days. But hopefully when I get out to California at some point in the next few years, we will be able to get more reviews from them up on the channel. But when I saw this collaboration coming through Systembolaget here in Sweden, I thought, we need to get one of these and do a review. So here we are. It's a style that I very much enjoy, so hopefully it's another good beer, and hopefully you guys enjoy my take on it as well. So yeah, for this review then, we are going to head over to the state of California on the west coast. We're going to go to San Diego in the south, which is a very, very well regarded beer city, and we're going to have a look at another beer from Alesmith Brewing Company. So this particular beer is brewed in collaboration with Pizza Port Brewing, who are also of San Diego. It's called Beach Run, comes in at 6.9% ABV, and this one is a West Coast IPA. Now, there are a few hops in this one that I've never had in a West Coast IPA, if memory serves me correctly. Enigma from Australia, Cashmere, which can be grown in quite a few different places. I think it originates in America though, but we get quite a bit of Slovenian Cashmere here in Europe. And there's also Sabro in this one, which is another American hop. So yeah, some firsts going on in this one, but we know that West Coast IPAs are styles these breweries are very, very familiar with. So yeah, very much looking forward to this one. I do miss the old school West Coast IPAs. But let's crack on with this and see how we go. So, as always with my reviews then, I'll tell you a little bit about the breweries involved here before we taste the beer. If you want to get straight to the tasting, just fast forward. All the usual links can be found in the video description below. That's the brewery websites, the link to my other reviews involving Alesmith and Pizza Port Brewing. We will hopefully add more to those lists in the near future. There's all the usual social media. If you want to see more reviews, do please consider subscribing to the channel, and you can of course check out the playlist of beers from different countries. You will find this one in the American playlist. But let's crack on and get started on the history section of the video. So we'll start off with Alesmith, since these guys are the home brewery in this case. So Alesmith, as I've mentioned to you already, are based in San Diego in California, and the company was founded back in 1995 by Skip Virgilio and Ted Newcomb. So the first brewery was in Cabot Drive in the Miramar area, and this was equipped with a 15-barrel system, and they also had an in-house tap room. For those of you watching in Europe, one American barrel is in the region of 160 litres. I think it's 158 point something if memory serves me correctly, but we'll say 160. But the company was then bought a little bit later by Peter Zien in 2002, who is a certified, quote, Grandmaster Level 1 beer judge, and he went on to become the brewmaster. So he had been a really well-respected and well-known home brewer in San Diego for a long time, and he previously managed his family's home repair business. But at that time, when Zien purchased Alesmith, they were producing around 400 barrels per year, but the brewery was continually expanded, and by 2012 they were producing 15,000 American barrels of beer per year. So that's about 2.4 million litres. But in 2015 they moved to a 100,000 square foot facility a few blocks to the west, which is fitted with an 80 BBL system, or 12,700 litres per brew, and this is one of the largest beer tasting rooms in California apparently. So that is one that I will be going on to check out. But as of September 2022, when I'm filming this review for you, these guys have produced 505 different kinds of beer according to Untappd. And yeah, I think probably the beer that these guys are most well known for is the Speedway Stout. There's a whole host of different editions of that. But yeah, Alesmith are a very, very well respected California brewery. There are a number of beers I do want to try from these guys. The Old Numbskull is one that comes to mind. So yeah, I'll need to keep an eye out for that actually. But yeah, Alesmith is definitely one of the places I need to go and check out the next time I make it out to California. I've not been there since I was about 4 years old. Can't really remember it. But yeah, as I say, it is most definitely on the list. But yeah, that is all I can tell you about Alesmith for the moment. So if you want to learn more about these guys, check out the brewery website, follow them on social media. That'll keep you up to date with all the latest goings on. But let's go on to the second brewery then, the away brewery, the the guest brewery, whatever we're going to call them. So, Pizza Port Brewing Company. I remember a few years back I actually reviewed Swami's IPA from these guys, which is a bit of a classic, so check it out. But yeah, Pizza Port Brewing Company, as I mentioned to you as well, are also based in San Diego in California. So the company was founded by siblings Gina and Vince Marsaglia, and they bought a struggling pizza place in Solana Beach back in March of 1987. So they had some free space in the premises, and Vince started experimenting with home brewing. But a few years later, they installed a 7-barrel brew kit, and the first beers were produced on this kit in October of 1992. But over the next couple of years, they continued to expand, and they've expanded to new restaurants in Carlsbad, which opened in 1997, San Clemente in 2003, Ocean Beach in 2010, and Bresci Ranch in Carlsbad in 2013. But they also opened a bottle shop across from their Carlsbad location in 2008, and over the course of their history, they've won various medals and awards, and they're widely regarded in the San Diego beer scene as having been one of the most influential breweries in the San Diego beer scene, along with, Alesmith and guys like this. These guys are very, very well respected. But their restaurant is also regarded as one of the best places to have pizza and beer together in the US. But the majority of the production these days takes place at the Bresci Ranch facility in Carlsbad. I actually couldn't find a figure for how much they are producing each year, so I will need to research that a little bit more the next time I get a Pizza Port Brewing. But I had a quick flick around and there wasn't all that much data on how much they are actually producing. It's probably increasing constantly, knowing how American business works and things. But as of September 2022, when I'm filming this review for you, these guys have produced 1,760 different kinds of beer according to Untappd. And from what I understand, in each of the different locations, they actually brew a few different beers that you will only find in that location. But as I say, the beers that you find in cans are produced at the Bresci Ranch facility in Carlsbad, which is kind of to the north of San Diego, actually. But yeah, again, that is all I can tell you about Pizza Port Brewing Company for the moment. If you want to learn more about these guys, again, check out the brewery website. You can follow them on Facebook and Instagram to keep up to date with all the latest goings on. And you can check out the Rate Beer, Untappd and Beer Advocate pages to learn more about all the different beers that they've done. And the same goes for Alesmith. So yeah, let's get on and have a little look at the beer itself. So this one is 1 American pint, 16 fluid ounces. The American measurement system annoys me. We're not going to get into that. But in real measurements, millilitres, the metric system, this would be 473. Millilitres. But yeah, as I mentioned earlier, it's a 6.9% West Coast American IPA, and the hops in this one are Enigma, which comes from Australia. Again, that's about 14% alpha acid. It gives you this lovely white, green, grapey sort of thing with a little bit of a kind of red curranty note to it. Cashmere is a really interesting one, big melon flavours, but it's also got quite a pungent lemon and lime. Again, about 14% alpha acid. It is grown in Slovenia, but I think it originated in the US, if memory serves me correctly. And then there's Sabro in here too, which is, yeah, about 14% alpha acid, and it gives you that big, bright tangerine and coconutty sort of thing. As I said earlier, these are 3 hops that, if memory serves me correctly, I've not had in a West Coast IPA before, so this should be very, very interesting. But nice can on this one. You can see this little thing on the back here, Beach Run. But yeah, I think this should be pretty good. So yeah, plain silver top on it. Let's get it out and we'll get on with the tasting. I actually can't remember what I paid for this one. I think, just guessing compared to what it would be compared to the Swedish beers, I would say it's probably about 60 Swedish kroner, something like that, because it would, a Swedish version of this beer would be about 50, and then you add on about 10 kroners because it's an import one. So that'll be about, yeah, 50, yeah, maybe 55, 60 Swedish krona. We'll go with 60. So that is roughly about €6, £5.50 sterling, I guess $6.50 American for a can. So yeah, not too bad actually. And potentially about the same price as you would pay for it in California, that's the thing. So yeah, let me know if you're watching from California what you would actually pay for a can of a 7% IPA. I'd be very curious to see what the beer prices are like as of September 2022. So yeah, anyway, as you can see with this one, before the head disappears, it's poured with just under a 3/4 finger of quite a bumpy, I would say, cream coloured head. That is not a perfect white head, I can tell you that right away. Not a perfect white head, but yeah, quite bumpy as you can see. So in terms of the colour, I would describe this one as a nice kind of pale golden straw colour. 1 or 2 big bubbles sticking toward the side of the glass, but a few little ones just going up toward the bottom of that head there. But it certainly looks very, very nice, and nothing untoward about this one when you consider the fact that it is a West Coast or California, whatever we're going to call it, IPA. But yeah, you can see quite clearly it's been filtered. The colour of the beer, of course, depends on the type of malts that you use and the length of your wort boil. The longer you boil the wort, the more the sugars caramelise, and thus you get a darker colour of beer. West Coast IPAs can range from like a pale golden straw like this to a really rich amber, in my experience. So yeah, I think that's everything we need to say about the appearance of this one. So let's go on and have a wee look at the aroma then. Very curious about this. Oh yeah, right. So, as I've explained in other videos, for me, a West Coast IPA can take two directions. So they can either be really kind of biscuity and light and bready, such as Pliny the Elder from Russian River, for example, or they can be really oily and caramelly, such as the Sierra Nevada Torpedo. This one I think is going to be is more along the lines of the Russian River Pliny the Elder variety. This one, the first impression you have of this is it's a lot more biscuity and bready, but it's got some big oily fruity notes to it. But the interesting thing is it doesn't come across as being too bitter, and that's one of my big complaints about more modern West Coast IPAs, is that they don't have the big bitter hit that you used to get from the likes of Chinook, Columbus, and all of these kind of guys. So I'm curious to see whether this one is going to have that, because it is American brewed. Yeah, but aroma wise, I will say straight away, this one smells very, very nice. So, backbone of the beer, and this is one of the things, in a lot of American brews they use 2-row malts, and they're just so distinctive. You just get this lovely mix of biscuit and brown sugar out of them, and you can smell that straight away in this beer. But backbone of this one, absolutely, a little bit of a fresh, white bread, hedgehog roll bread crust, soft white bread on top of that. It's almost like a kind of buttery bread, and that's another kind of telltale sign of American malt for me. American malt just smells a little bit more kind of sweet and buttery in some senses. But yeah, bread crust, fresh white bread. As I say, it's a little bit buttery. And then you do get a little bit of a sweet caramel out of this one. There is a wee bit of a straight up caramel in this, but it gives way to a more kind of honey aroma, actually, which is kind of interesting. But there's a lot of McVitie's digestive biscuit. I'm not sure how good a descriptor that is for Americans. It's definitely got a little bit of that kind of digestive biscuit, or they would call it cookies, of course, in American English. It's definitely got a little bit of that sort of cookie sweetness to it as well. But yeah, aroma-wise, I think this is very, very nice on the malty side of things, but definitely a more kind of biscuity and white bready variety of a West Coast IPA, rather than a big oily caramel thing. Yeah, one or two little woody notes to it. You do get a little bit more brown bread out of it the more that you smell of the beer too. But yeah, I really like how this goes together. It gets a thumbs up from me on that side of things. On the hoppy side of the beer then, let's look at the green component. So, yeah, little touch of earthiness to it for sure. There's a big, for me, the green component leans toward a more kind of slightly deep floral thing. So remember, with West Coast IPAs, they tend to have all three types of hopping. They'll have early addition hops within the first hour of the wort boil. That gives you the majority of your bitterness. They'll have late addition hopping, which is the last half hour of the wort boil, assuming of course it's a standard 90-minute boil. But yeah, in the last 30 minutes of the boil you'll get a little bit of bitterness, but mainly flavour and aroma, and then afterwards you'll get your dry hopping, and those are those hops will give you just only flavour and aroma. But yeah, I like it very, very much. Yeah, aroma wise, on the green side of things, it really has a depth to the floral character. It has got a wee touch of spice to it, and there's some nice grassy notes in there as well, which are very, very zesty. Yeah, aroma wise, this is good. The fruity side of things though is really, really interesting in this one. So absolutely, you can smell that sort of gooseberry, white, green, grapey sort of thing from the Enigma. You can really get that in this one, but you're also getting, you do get a little bit of the melon from the Cashmere, but I think the Enigma is pushing that back a lot, because you have to be careful with Cashmere in my experience, and particularly in New England, because there's some of the New England yeasts that it acts in a really interesting way with it. Cashmere can really dominate a beer and really make it overly citrusy. But you are getting a little bit of that melon out of it. You can smell the kind of more gooseberry, white green grapey note from the the Enigma. But I'm also getting a nice I'm getting quite a bright orange out of it, and that's from the Sabro. But it's interesting because that white green grapey thing, you can just smell the little bit of coconut that you would always expect from Sabro. Some of my friends have said that Sabro just reminds them of pina colada. And you do get a little bit of that in this one. It's really kind of unusual to get a bit of coconut out of a West Coast IPA, that's for sure. But you can smell, the more that you smell this beer, it's kind of in the top of the nose, you start to get this, you do start to get a little bit of this kind of lemon limey character, and that of course is the Cashmere. Not getting too much of the red fruity thing that you'd normally get from Enigma, so I'm curious to see whether that's going to come out in the actual flavour of the beer. But yeah, I think it's about time that we had a taste of this one to see what it's all about. So yeah, take a bit of time to enjoy the aroma, but we're going to get stuck in now. So this one is the Beach Run, a 6.9% West Coast IPA from Alesmith Brewing and Pizza Port Brewing, both of whom can be found in San Diego in the southern part of California, over on the American West Coast. Let's get stuck in. Slàinte, skål, cheers. Ooh, that is nice. I'm waiting to see if the bitterness builds in it. First impression of this, it's got the lovely sweet backbone that you want from a West Coast IPA. It has got the big floral note, it's got the nice big oily fruits as well, but it just doesn't have the bitterness. It just does not have the bitterness. But in fairness, what I will say is, quite a few of the modern West Coast IPAs that we're getting over here in Europe, the malt base just isn't quite the same. So I think the American West Coast IPAs pull off the low bitterness a bit better than the European ones, in fairness. But feel free to disagree with that in the comment section below if you have a strong opinion on that. It's always nice to hear what other people think. Beer is always subjective, as we always say. But yeah, I think when it comes to this the West Coast IPA as a style category, I think the American malts really are one of the things that make these beers. Although, you know, some of the early German brewed West Coast IPAs that I had were absolutely lovely. Some of the Polish ones too were great. But yeah, this is a really nice, just kind of old school West Coast IPA. The flavour profile is kind of spot on to what you would have had back in the day, but just not quite as big and bitter and floral and piney and stuff like this. But again, it could just be the modern hops, but you know, all of these hops are high alpha acid, so if you add them early enough in the wort ball, they will give you that big green component. We do also have to remember, I'm drinking this beer when it's probably not at its freshest. I don't know if it does actually have a canned on date on it, because that would be worth knowing. It doesn't say, actually does not say. So yeah, nothing on that about the can date, so we'll just need to assume that it'll be a couple of months old. It will be a few months old, but it's still a nice beer, and that's the main thing. But yeah, let's break this down and describe the flavour for you a wee bit more in depth. So, yeah, it's a very straight shooting beer for the style category, and I like it. So, middle third of your palate, and I will say this is one of these beers where the flavour, what you pick up in the aroma really translates into the flavour pretty well, actually. So, let's look at that. Yeah, middle third of your palate then. The backbone of the beer, there's a little bit of that fresh white bread crust. Absolutely good. That does get a little bit more grainy the further you go into the aftertaste, but on top of that, you get a lovely, quite crisp, fresh white bread in there. I would say that it becomes a little bit more of a kind of wholemeal brown bread sort of thing the further you go into the aftertaste with the beer. But it still, it still does go very, very nicely. And I'll say too, for a 6.9%, Very easy to drink that. Very, very easy to drink. Yeah, so on top of that white bread, as I say, you've got a little bit of a brown bready layer. There are one or two little woody undertones to this one the further forward you go. The further forward you go on that middle third of your palate. But yeah, on top of that kind of brown bready layer, that's when you start to get the slightly brown sugary element out of this one. And I think it's better with that to work from the top down or the middle out. So if you go to the dead centre of your palate in that middle third of your tongue, there is a little circle there. And you do get a bit of a straight up caramel coming out of the beer there. So that's worth noting. So yeah, a little bit of straight up caramel. As you move further out from that, you start to get the more McVitie's digestive biscuity sort of things. As I said earlier, when it comes to West Coast IPAs, this one in its flavour profile on the malty side of things is a lot more akin to Pliny the Elder than it is to, say, Sierra Nevada Torpedo. So yeah, we must say that. But yeah, you will get that little bit of booziness in the middle of your palate, which is really, really nice. So yeah, I will say as well that the more that you drink of this one, the more of the biscuitiness you get out of the beer, which I think is great. I do really like that. But on the other side of things, it does get a little touch more grainy the further into the aftertaste you go, but I like it. I think we don't need to say anything more about the middle third of the palate. Let's focus on the back third of the palate. Border region between middle third and back third of your palate, you get a little bit of a bready build up there. It's a wee bit of a kind of brown bready sort of thing. And the backbone of that middle third of that back third of your beer is a little, it's bread crust, but it is definitely really more grainy and slightly drier. But on top of that, yeah, you have a really nice kind of you do get more of the kind of wholemeal brown bready thing, and you can feel that layer is a little bit taller there, and then on top of all that you start to get the more airy yeasty character coming out of the beer, so you can feel that really airy white bread, or well, it's more of a brown bread, but there is a mix of white bread in there, and that just sits on top of everything. So on the back third of the palate, this one is you can feel the flavour is a lot taller. Then as you come further forward, it just condenses down a little bit and squashes together, and that, I think, covers the malty and yeasty side of this beer. Let's focus on the hoppy side of things, and I think this is where it gets quite interesting. So yeah, hoppy side of the beer then. Back corners of the palate, you do get a little touch of earthiness with this one. As you move further forward, it's a little bit herbal. Then as you come further forward, you start to get more of a kind of floral note out of this one. There is a wee touch of spice in there. There is a wee touch of spice to it. But yeah, the whole green component is quite wet. Yeah. Yeah, the green component of this one is really quite wet rather than anything else. But round the front curve of the palate, it's definitely lighter and grassier, and you do have a wee bit of zest to the grassiness in there, but it's quite an oily zest, and I think that's the cashmere that's going to give you that. But yeah, let's focus on that front third of your palate and the fruity notes of the beer. So border region between front third and middle third of your palate. Again, you get a little bit of that bready build up in this one. Then the base of that front third of your palate is more kind of brown bready as well, and on top of that you get the nice oily bubble where the juicy fruity esters just roll their way out of the beer. So yeah, I like that. I do like that too. So yeah, at the back of that front third of your palate, it's the cashmere. It is absolutely the cashmere that's coming out of this one. You get that slightly stronger but quite zesty melony note coming out of the beer. Then as you move further forward, you can feel there's a nice sort of oily gooseberry, white green grapey sort of thing, and that's the enigma that's giving you that. As you move towards the kind of front tip of the tongue, it's interesting because you do get a little touch of the coconut from the sabro, but on top of the kind of white green grapey sort of thing on the front part of the tongue, there's two things going on. You do get a little touch of the red fruity note from the from the Enigma, but I'd say that's very minimal. I'm not getting much in the way of orange out of this one, but let me just see that again. Yeah. For me, I don't get too much in the way of orange out of this beer. There is a little bit, but I think it takes a back seat to the melon and the sort of yeah, it takes a bit of a back seat to the melon and to the kind of white green grapey sort of thing, which I like. But yeah, as you move toward the kind of front tip of the tongue, you certainly have a little bit of that lemony, limey type character to the beer, which I do like. And again, that's from the Cashmere. So the Cashmere is definitely the most prominent hop in this, followed by the Enigma for sure. But I think the Sabro takes a bit of a back seat to the other ones. But as I say, Cashmere can just be such a dominant hop, and it's interesting to see that it does the same thing in West Coast IPAs as it does in New England. It must just be such a pungent hop in terms of its flavour. So yeah, this is definitely quite interesting to see these hops in a West Coast IPA. Remember, hops can behave in completely different ways depending on what yeast you put them with or what malt base you do. But it is interesting to see that Cashmere is just as pungent in a West Coaster as it is in a New England. So yeah, interesting stuff. Other than that, I don't think we need to say much more about the kind of flavour profile of this one. I think we can round off with a wee look at the mouthfeel then. So, mouthfeel wise, this one, to me, for a West Coast IPA, it's right in the middle of the spectrum. Carbonation is nice and smooth. It does have a degree of oiliness to it. Yeah, it's quite clean at the same time. But yeah, in terms of the hoppy bitterness and things, like I say, this one, it's not going to blow the head off you in terms of its bitterness. There's actually, I would be surprised if this is over 40 or 50 IBUs. It does seem quite low. It doesn't say. It doesn't say what its IBU count is, this one. But yeah, I would be surprised if this is more than 40 or 50 IBUs. But bear in mind, as I say, I'm not drinking this as fresh as it would have been. And when it's an import, that's one of the things you have to be careful of with the American IPAs when they come through Systembolaget. They're not always in the best of condition. So take that with a pinch of salt. Malty based, as we said, it's got a lovely breadiness to it. You can feel the American two-row malts and things coming out in this one. And the fruity character is lovely and oily, which is what I would always want in a West Coast IPA. But yeah, I think we can leave it at that for this review. This was the Beach Run 6.9% West Coast IPA, brewed at Alesmith Brewing Company in collaboration with Pizza Port. Really cool to see Cashmere, Enigma and Sabro all in a West Coast IPA for the first time, if my memory is serving me correctly. And cool to return to these breweries after what seems like a good long while. So yeah, let's leave it at that. Once again, thank you for watching my beer reviews. Till the next time, please like, subscribe, share, all the usual YouTube stuff. Let me know your own thoughts on this beer in the comment section below. Let me know what your favourite beer from both of these breweries are. Hopefully we can go and visit them for an out and about video at some point in the future. But in the meantime, check out my social media, check out the brewery's social media, and I'll see you guys very soon with more reviews. Sláinte, skål, and cheers.